Hello and welcome to the Boys Upstairs Show. This is the NFL Divisional Round Playoff Show.
Woo! Woo!
Woo! Welcome
Woo!
back, everybody. It was a pretty underwhelming wild card weekend. Only game that kind of lived up to the hype was Commanders Bucks, but the best of the teams have made it to the divisional round, and hopefully this weekend will be four bangers. We're going to start it off with Texans Chiefs. Chiefs obviously were on bye last week. They're big home favorites in Kansas City, 8.5 points. Total's 42.5. We'll give it to Postman.
The Chargers were my dark horse AFC contender. I had a large future placed on them that I placed over the summer. I'm no longer underestimating the Chiefs, and the 8.5 is a lot of points. With that said, even though 8.5 is a lot of points and the Chiefs play every game close, I just can't justify not picking Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. It just seems impossible. And until he proves me wrong and he doesn't lose to either Tom Brady or Joe Burrow, I refuse to pick against him. And for that reason, I'm going to have to go Chiefs minus 8.5.
The Chiefs are going to win this game. No doubt in my mind about that. I think the Texans have been kind of up and down this year. They had a great game last week against LA. The defensive front is really the difference in that game, and I think it'll be a big part of this game as well with Daniel Hunter and Will Anderson as well, causing a lot of pressure, forcing Justin Herbert to throw more picks in one game than he threw all season. Derek Stingley is definitely a problem on the outside, and Lassiter had a pick too. Um, I'm going to take the Texans plus 8.5 here because, like Postman said, 8.5 is a lot of fucking points. And I do see this being a close game, but a game that the Chiefs will ultimately win by probably seven, maybe three, like Postman kind of alluded to with Bucker kicking a game-winning field goal. I could see that too. One thing that I did see today that I think is kind of important to mention is that Mahomes has never had a turnover in the divisional round, which is pretty insane. He's been in the divisional round every year that he's been in the playoffs every year he's been starting. So no turnovers. He's basically been perfect in the divisional round. But I think the Chiefs win. I think the Texans cover. Texans are a decent ball club, really good defense. And Chiefs have been, obviously still the Chiefs, great record, but not blowing teams out. So I think 8.5 is a lot of points for a divisional round playoff game. I'll take the Texans.
Watching the Texans game last week, we were all on the show a little fringy about what the Texans were going to do in the playoffs. You saw they lost Tank Dell. Nico Collins had been out here and there. Their weapons are kind of dwindling a little bit. But we saw the run game kind of get back of Joe Mixon, and we saw that defense that was supposed to be like a top tier Texans defense this year kind of come back into form against the Chargers, which have been a pretty low risk, high power offense and running the ball, making throws that you know you're going to make, and a lot of their like deficiencies have come from drops and self-inflicted errors. But to force a guy like Herbert, who is a great quarterback at keeping the ball out of the other team's hands, to throw four interceptions like that and just look like a completely lost puppy, was pretty impressive, especially for a team that's dealt with as much as the Texans have this year. Not saying they're like cursed by any means. They made the playoffs going whatever 10-7, won their division. So they've got plenty going for them. It's been a saying as old as time, as long as I've been on the show, 8.5 is a lot of fucking points. And the Chiefs this year as a whole, you can't ignore it. And I know Postman said that they're not a good, like they're not a great team, but they find ways to win, which is, I wouldn't say they're not a great team. They're really well coached and they don't really make mistakes, which I guess taking talent aside, that makes you a good team. But the fact of the matter is, they haven't been winning games. They haven't been blowing teams out, except for the Steelers. Sorry, Tommy. Sorry, Sean. But they haven't been winning like these games in controllable fashion. Everyone knows playoff football, anything can happen. But 8.5 points coming here. Texans have got a little something going. They've got momentum for sure off last week. So I'm going to go with them plus 8.5. I think their defense will be able to make some plays. I think Andy Reid is probably going to go with a very kind of low risk, conservative game plan here. And like not to get on the Rooney boys again, but like he did against the Steelers, I was there in person. He aired the ball out. Mahomes aired the ball out maybe a couple times, but it was a lot of just short little screen plays, short RPOs over the middle, getting those quick yard plays, and it makes that clock run out really quick. And as we've said a lot this year, clock running out means less points. And 41.5 is a little low, especially with teams that can be explosive, as we know for both of them. Who knows? Maybe they're going to play a game this year that won't be at Saturday, 3:30 Central Time. Maybe we'll see.
One thing that you guys haven't talked about is the Chiefs starters have not played meaningful football since Christmas, basically.
25 days.
25 days of rest. And that's something that I'm going to take into account with my pick, and I'm going to take the Texans plus 8.5. I do not believe the Texans are going to win this game, but I think they're going to cover that. And another thing I would like to say to the viewers, first half under is a great pick for this game, considering that the Chiefs are probably going to take that first half as kind of like a feeling out process, right? The Texans defense played great last week. They forced a bunch of turnovers. They were able to make Justin Herbert feel uncomfortable. They completely, besides that 80-yard touchdown pass, they completely took Lad McConkey out the game. They made the Chargers look very, very pedestrian, which, as Sam pointed out, has been a team that has been not an offensive juggernaut, but they're a good offense. They run the ball well, and they were able to make the throws when they needed to be made with Herbert and their weapons on the outside. Another issue for the Chiefs that I want to talk about outside of them having rest is they're still moving guys on the offensive line. They now have their right guard playing right tackle for this game, going up against Will Hunter. I mean, sorry, not Will Hunter. Will Anderson and Hunter. And that's not a recipe for success, especially with how we saw those guys rushing the passer last week. Now, this is something that the Chiefs have been dealing with all year, and they've only lost one game. Like I said, it's not an end all be all. It's not like I'm picking the Texans to win this game, but I am saying that the Texans are going to cover 8.5.
I don't want to say I don't like the guy, but he's a little much. But he's three-time Super Bowl champ, and so I don't think the rest is necessarily going to affect him much. The Texans, everyone thought might have been the worst team in the playoffs, other than the Steelers, and then they have the big upset. So I think they're like the sneaky dark horse to beat the Chiefs, and everyone's been saying the Chiefs been looking like shit all year, even though they finished with only two losses or one. I don't remember. Um, but I'm gonna stick with the Super Bowl champs, and go with the easy pick, however much they're favored.
I am definitely rooting for the Texans in this game. Like this year, I've been an advocate for a couple players.
You
Josh
took them. You
Allen.
took them to win the Super Bowl, Cub.
Yeah. So people know I'm an advocate for the Texans. Big CJ Stroud guy. So I'm glad to hear a lot more people taking the Texans than I thought. I didn't think because last week I think I was like one of like two people on the show who took the Texans.
I took them.
Oh yeah, and not a lot of people took the Texans, so I'm happy to hear that, and I will be rooting for them. But I do pride my head on being able to keep my feelings and my wants away from like the inner analyst in me. So although I will be rooting for the Texans, and I hope they win, I'm a huge CJ Stroud guy. I am going to be taking the Chiefs in this game. A lot of people were talking about, Daniil Hunter, Will Anderson, who played phenomenal last week, but the Texans were getting blitzed out the ass too. CJ Stroud was, especially in the first half, the CJ Stroud had a lot of trouble in the pocket. They were getting him from all angles. I mean, I know they have a really good D line, but Carl Loftus, Chris Jones, they have some linebackers that they can send. I feel like the Chiefs are going to be blitzing the Texans, and that, as we've seen all season this year, the Texans, they struggle when they get a lot of pressure on CJ. Their O-line has not been good. He doesn't have as many weapons, obviously, due to injury. So I feel like the Chiefs are going to blitz the Texans to hell, and then it's going to be really hard for the Texans. Andy Reid, great team, great defense. That their defense is one of the best it's been in some years. It's probably gonna go after CJ a lot, and I don't know how the Texans are gonna respond to that. I also feel like, last year we saw the Texans, they won their first playoff game against, I think it was the Browns. They go into Baltimore and they get absolutely dogged out. Lamar had the leg up, the thumb in the butt, all that good stuff. I feel like now they're going to Kansas City. They're kind of meeting, a team that's beat them a lot over the past couple of years, and just a team that I feel like is all out better. Like, yeah, the Texans are fun, but they're not healthy. They had a lot of struggles this year. Their O-line is bad. I just feel like they can't compete with this Chiefs team. And although I do feel like that, that like we were saying before, that the Chiefs' timing is probably going to be off. They haven't played meaningful football in forever. I think that they're almost like so much better, not so much better, but I think that it's not going to make that much of a difference. I like Nixon's first half under pick. I feel like the first half will be a feeling out process, but I feel like by the end of the game, they're the Chiefs. They had pretty much the same roster for some years with a couple new pieces. I'm also going to take the over. I feel like the Chiefs, like I said, they're going to be eager. Once they get that shit clicking, once they get the on the field stuff clicking, they get the rhythm back a little bit after the first half. Adjacent to Nixon's first half, under the second half over. Like I feel like once they figure it out and get clicking, they're ready to roll. They want to play some football. They didn't get to play against the Broncos for real. They haven't played in a minute. They didn't get to play in the wild card. So I feel like that once they get clicking physically, they're going to be running with it. They might cover the over by themselves eventually. Might score like 7 points in the first half and end up with like 35. So I'm taking the Chiefs and the over.
Honestly, Brad, I'm gonna take the Texans spread. I think that's too many days off from football, honestly. Um, I don't think that like any team, any player can just be rested for that long and just come back to the field and win by more than two scores or two possessions. So I'm gonna take the Texans spread. Honestly, it sucks betting against Patrick Mahomes. You never want to bet against Patrick Mahomes. It's like betting against LeBron, but I'm gonna take Texans spread.
Like and subscribe. Tell your friends.
Like and subscribe.